Hello and welcome to this episode of How to Be a Great Player. Now in today's episode we're looking at this problem. Alright, so Brian,
Yeah.
your character's asleep, yes?
Yeah.
Alright, so Anthony, your character's walking down the corridor when suddenly this mysterious figure appears in front of you. He turns into this nasty vampire, his fangs extending, his claws outreaching.
Oh, Jim, I wake up and I draw my sword and I go running down the corridor and I cut off the vampire's head.
No. Metagaming. That horrid moment when you as the player are listening to the story that your character isn't necessarily involved in, and yet you want to try and become part of the action. So you come running down the corridor and cut off that vampire's head, even though there's no way that in the situation your character could possibly have known that that situation was even happening, let alone that the vampire was posing a threat to the other player character. Metagaming is a difficult space to operate in because we are collectively telling a story. So when your character isn't necessarily involved, how do you get them involved, and how do you make sure that you're not giving your character some kind of knowledge that you as the player has, but that your character doesn't? Now this extends even further. It extends to the point that if you happen to have read the entire Monsters Encyclopedia for Farscape or for Star Wars, and you know what a Gamorrean does versus a Rancor, or whether you know what a Klingon strength should be versus, say, an Andorian strength, or what an Orc should be versus a Goblin. If you know all of those statistics and you know how to defeat those creatures, that is you as the player. That is not your character. Your character, if they're lowly level or if they don't have much by way of arcane knowledge or survival knowledge or racial species knowledge or intergalactic xenobiology, if they don't have that, then your character doesn't have that. So how does this work then? What does this mean? Because surely your character is you. No, it isn't. Remember, you are playing the character. The character is not playing you. So that means you have to make a definitive line. This is what my character knows, and this is what I know. And you don't cross those lines. Well, maybe you do, but we're going to cover that in next week's video. Crossing the line of metagaming, but we'll get there. So metagaming is the unfortunate reality of you as the player bringing game-specific knowledge to your character, or imbuing your character with game-specific knowledge that the character wouldn't normally have. And why you do this, there's so many reasons, I'm not going to go into them. So that's what metagaming is. So how can you avoid it? How can you make it so that you don't do that? Well, perhaps the question we should ask first is it bad? Is it bad that your character knows how to defeat a troll, even though that's the knowledge your player has, that's knowledge you have, but not your character? Surely by bringing that information, you're going to defeat the troll and make sure that it stays dead, and isn't that a good thing? Well, no, it isn't. And the reason why is because as you gain more experience as a player, as you learn the systems better, as you start to run your own games, perhaps as a GM, you start to understand the mechanics behind the game. You start to see creatures as, well, this is its weakness. If I hit it with silver, it'll die. If I hit it with this, it'll live. All of that information starts to almost make your game less interesting if that is brought to the game by your character. So if your character's got so much knowledge about the world that they know exactly how to combat every situation, every creature, and can wake up knowing the stories of all of the other characters that are, doing things around your character whilst your character's unconscious, asleep, in a different kingdom, on a different spaceship, it removes the element of story, it removes the element of narrative, and it disempowers you to having an interesting experience. Let's look at an example, perhaps. And an easy one to use is, let's say, vampires, because they fit into most settings. Vampires are traditionally affected by silver, by garlic, by stakes through the heart, cutting their head off, destroying the earth that they return to every night. They can't walk around during the day. They can't cross running streams. All of that is general knowledge to us as humans, hopefully, as players, because we are bombarded with social media and with films and with television programs that tell us all of this information repeatedly. We're even bombarded with films that show that vampires don't have any of those things, but they let the public think they do because then it allows them to move around. In other words, we know how to defeat vampires on the whole. As a human species, if a vampire ever turned up, that poor bastard wouldn't live very long because he'd be staked, garlicked and silvered before he knew what was going on. A peasant in 1300 AD England wouldn't have a clue about all of that kind of stuff. They really wouldn't. A starship captain floating around in deep space, where cinema is no longer the main form of entertainment, might not know about that kind of stuff. It might be dismissed as folklore and something that happened 300 years ago. We certainly don't know how or what the cure was for, let's say, warts 500 years ago. There might be some books on it, but it's obscure knowledge. That's how it would be in the future as well. So, in other words, the character doesn't have the information that we have in our heads as the player. If you then come across a vampire, let's say that you're playing a Viking game and there's this vampire walking around, you wouldn't know how to defeat it. You'd hit it with your weapon, and your weapon wouldn't do any damage against it because it's not silvered. In other words, for you as the player, the enjoyment that you now get is trying to figure out how to get your character in that situation to work out what works and what doesn't work. You need to relish the fact that you know, but your character doesn't. And how can you get your character into situations where, if they had known what was going on, they would never have been there, or they would have been better armed? That's the joy of storytelling. Not just going, oh, well, I silver my weapon, I load up on garlic, and I walk out and I cut the thing's head off. That's not entertaining. Entertaining is saying, well, I take my trusty axe, go up to it and hit it because that'll kill it. It kills everything else. It's still alive. All right, so that's the bad part of metagaming, is that you're removing for yourself and for your fellow players any kind of story narrative that fun, basically. So that's the bad side of metagaming. All right, so now how do you avoid it? How do you work around metagaming? Well, there's a very simple, very, very simple way of doing it. I've got players who do it all of the time. It's asking yourself before you do something, does my character know this or do I know this? If I know this and my character doesn't, then my character doesn't do it. Simple. On the other hand, where certain areas are grey, for example, where there aren't specific mechanics in place to handle whether your character would know it or wouldn't know it, or if it's lumped into a general knowledge type of thing. General knowledge is very broad. My general knowledge on motor cars extends to the history and development of the motor car, but I couldn't tell you really the difference between a Lexus, a BMW, or a Mercedes. They all have 4 wheels and a steering wheel. However, the inventor of lead petrol happened to be the same man who invented CFCs and ended up killing himself in a device of his own construction. That I can tell you. So my general knowledge in one area is quite specific, but in another is completely lacking. So in those kind of situations, my players do what they call a level check, where they roll an appropriate dice, add their character level or a suitable skill, and go, well, it's general knowledge, so maybe my character picked it up somewhere in a library or whatever, if there isn't already a skill that covers or compensates for that lack of general knowledge. So, bottom line, ask yourself, do I know this or does my character know it? If your character doesn't know it, don't do it. Just avoid it altogether. At least that's what I'm saying in this video. Next week's video, I'm going to be saying something different. But that's once you grasp the concept of metagaming. Now, one of the little things that you can also look out for, because again, remember the negative side of metagaming is that you are removing your opportunity for enjoyment and for fun. The way to call out your fellow players on metagaming. If the GM doesn't step in and say, you were asleep at the time, you don't know any of that. Let's say the GM doesn't notice, or the GM's missed that, or the GM is just not very strong and he kind of lets it happen. You as the player are perfectly within your rights to say, sorry, Sally, you were asleep when that was happening. You don't know any of this, remember? So polite reminder that they don't know anything about it, absolutely fine. And if they say, oh, but I want to get involved in the combat, then you say, right, go and watch these videos on YouTube, and they'll show you next week how to use metagaming to be able to tell a better narrative rather than to destroy narrative. So you don't have to feel that if someone else is role-playing and they're using their metagame knowledge, call them out on it and say, your character doesn't know that. Yes, you might be a super genius in real life, but I'm afraid you're playing a security officer who knows nothing about quantum mechanics. So your security officer, I don't think, should really be working on the quantum mechanics slipstream drive. Doesn't make sense to me. It's about being polite, it's about engaging your fellow players, and then also explaining to them what metagaming is. A lot of people don't necessarily understand it, and because they don't understand it, when you berate them on taking a choice of action, which is clearly a metagaming issue, they feel as if you're attacking them as players. Rather, explain to them why they are actually removing enjoyment from the game. Anyway, I hope this little foray, very briefly into metagaming, is giving you some insight as to how to play your game better and how to be able to get more fun out of your game. Next week's episode, as I've mentioned several times, is going to be looking at how we can then use metagaming in a good way, because it really can be a powerful tool, but only if you know how to use it correctly. So until next time, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I wish you the happiest of playing.